Accessing library computer data.
Out there are no saints. Just people.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Continuing our run through of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Right now we're up to the episode called Prophet and Lace. It is the 23rd episode of the 6th season. Aired on May 13th, 1998. It was probably a Friday the 13th. Written by Ira Stephen Bear, Hans Beimler. Directed by Alexander Siddig, old Dr. Bashir, in the director's chair. In this episode, Grand Nagus Zek is deposed after he begins to promote female rights. Quark changes his sex temporarily to prevent Brunt from becoming the new Grand Nagus. We're joined by Clay. Clay, how are you?
Yikes.
Did it live up to the warning that everyone gave you when you were ready for this one, the Ferengi episode? You even asked about it in a podcast, I think, what the Ferengi episode everyone's talking about is.
Yeah. Is this the most attempted sexual assault in one single episode of Star Trek?
Probably. It just the bluntness of it, I think, is probably unprecedented in Star Trek's history. I mean, the original series had a lot of sexual violence and sexual assault, maybe not like outright stated, but you could sort of read subtext into things. But this is the most blatant, if you do this for me, or if you S my D, I'll basically give you your job back kind of sexual harassment that's ever been in Star Trek.
Yeah. There's a lot of not great stuff going on in this episode. Maybe this should be my last episode because I feel like starting with Angel 1 and ending with this would be just such a nice bookend to my career here. Maybe this is going to be it. I feel like the parallels are there. And,
Let's see how you feel when this one is all said and done. Let's take a break. We're going to play an audio clip, and me and Clay are going to come back and break down Prophet and Lace.
Umaks for fun and profit?
It's a quick read.
Oh, you want me to be nice?
Let's face it. The customers, the Davo girls, the Ferengi waiters, they didn't hire you. And they can't fire you.
All right, so we're back with the Ferengi episode. Magnificent Ferengi, I think, was the one that we saw earlier here, Clay, but this one is special. It's generally regarded as one of the worst Star Trek episodes of all time. It's through and through a Ferengi episode, I guess. I'm kind of conflicted about this one. I sort of feel, I don't think it's a good episode, but it's along the lines of a Code of Honor for me from the TNG series, which is always said to be like one of the worst one. In Code of Honor, it's always derided as being racist because they cast all the aliens as black people who are like a warrior, misogynistic tribe. And I always think it's overstating. Like, to me, Code of Honor is no worse than any other first season TNG episode. It had like this unfortunate casting decision that torpedoes everything. Mm-hmm. But other than that, the script is pretty much the same. To me, this feels like in a lot of ways, this is almost like a perfect Ferengi script. And the offensiveness of it is because it's grounded in Star Trek. On the other hand, like the way that the Ferengi talk about things and do things, this kind of feels like it's the perfect Ferengi episode in a way. So I don't know what you can tease out of it besides the fact that Ferengi episodes are generally horrible, and this doesn't seem to be much of an exception.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the person who is the most at fault here is actually Dr. Bashir, who looks like he's stepped out of the David Cronenberg's Dead Ringers holodeck suite program, because he is actively going along with this garbage. But yeah, if you take a step back, this is just kind of how the Ferengis are, and I'm if you're looking at it outside of whether or not that is culturally acceptable to us in
humans.
Really any
right,
us in any era, let alone 2019. I mean, it's not, the actual story isn't it's not the worst thing they've ever done, oddly enough. But it's just like, I think the it feels like the liberties that they're taking come off so bad because they're leaning into aspects of the Ferengi that they don't really talk about. It's very negative stuff.
I'd argue they do talk about it though. Like what else?
Well, I shouldn't say they don't talk about it, but it's like they don't. It's always played as a joke.
Yes.
You never have Quark threatening to fire a woman because she won't sleep with him, or you know what I mean. Like that's just mean and
it
bad.
is. But is it true to the Ferengi? Is it like? Isn't that what they would do? You know?
Yeah, I'm not saying that it isn't.
Yeah.
It's just you know.
It's pretty rough.
Yeah, it's taking a really rough look at a species that is already pretty derided in a way that no other species is derided. Even like the well, I guess the Cardassians maybe, but even the Cardassians are like given some modicum of respect, whereas the Ferengi are just shit on by everybody.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it just feels like it's strange that it's maybe not strange that it doesn't work, because I agree. Like, I think the worst part of the episode is really just the beginning and the end, which is unnecessarily cruel for some reason. And then at the end, it's basically just like, yeah, like women kind of just want it anyway. Like even though Quark is wrong, even though Quark is trying to redeem himself, they come back and she's like, I do kind of want to do this to you. And he's like, all right, never mind. I forget everything that I've learned, which is a very strange twist for this Star Trek episode. Yeah,
I think that's kind of what really undoes it. I mean, on top of the fact that, it's just not really that fun to watch.
No.
Is that you can kind of excuse isn't the right word, but like you were saying, the actions are more or less in line with the way the Ferengi have been presented. But that negative, questionable approach, problematic approach, extends past the limits of the Ferengi, and that's where the problem is. Like that's the at the end when like you're saying, when the girl comes back and she's like, "Oh, I was all up for the quid pro quo sexual harassment here." It's like, yeah, okay, that doesn't really fly, and it makes you kind of feel like that they weren't as conscious of what they were doing as you and or I are saying that they might have been. You know,
yep.
And I think that's what undoes it.
Because I think the thing that they're like, DS9 has always been this show about homages to very old cinema and very old stories.
Mm-hmm.
Like Ira Steven Behr seems to like classic movies and stuff like that. And this is a trope that just exists in old cinema, and
it's some like it hot with Ferengis,
right? And like more modern would be like Tootsie and things like that. Like
right.
The idea exists, and it had been seen as funny. I wonder at the point that this came out, I think all the contemporary reviews for this one are just like, this is awful. So it's kind of I think it's a victim of trying to play an old classic trope in an era that it just doesn't age well. And now it particularly feels really bizarre that they do it. But I saw a lot of criticisms of the scene where the cola guy is chasing Quark around after he invites him into his room. Mm-hmm. And that to me is just a straight homage to that kind of comedy from those classic eras. It's like I understand not thinking it's funny, but the where they're drawing it from, it's clearly just like they're not making this content up. This is just playing off of this trope of the guy Pepe Le Pew style chases you around comically and can't get you.
Right.
Not to say that it's good, but it's not like the show is inventing this out of nowhere. It's doing a very strange decision to play up a very old sexist classic trope.
Yeah. It's, I mean, putting a guy in drag for comedic purposes is as old as the theater,
Right. Yeah. To the point where people like Chappelle or the black actors are now like, I just refuse to do it because it's such a trope of a black guy wearing a dress is like a very standard comedy thing for people to do.
Yeah, and I mean, it's if you watch SNL even today, when there's a fairly masculine actor or whoever on
The Rock. Rock always does it. Yeah,
100%. They're going to put him in a dress at some point, and it's just like, okay, that's the best you could do. Great. Yeah, they are definitely playing on that trope. I mean, the chasing around thing, that's straight out of any of those movies. I mean, that's a
Benny
big
Hill.
sequence.
Yeah.
Benny Hill is a big sequence in Tootsie. I'm sure it happens in Some Like It Hot. I haven't seen it in a long time. The humor of, oh my God, he's falling in love with a man, which
right, as he's trying desperately to get away. Yeah, right.
Yeah. It's weird. I think it's the weird dark edge that they put at the beginning that makes it that much worse.
Yeah.
It's like the middle of it is, I don't think you have to be that hard on it from a modern standpoint, because there's actually stuff in it that's surprisingly not cavemanish. Like the there is an interesting sort of commentary on the people who are against female empowerment when they talk about how all she did was put her clothes on and the entire economic system collapsed.
Yes.
It's like, yeah, that's they're making fun of idiots who are trying to keep women down, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's this weird dark undercurrent that they give to Quark just so he can have this change of heart that isn't even legitimate, because even at the end he's reacting to whatever female hormones are still in his body. So they're really undercutting their as I don't know if progressive is the word to use, but as especially not for this episode.
Yeah.
But anything that they're trying to say that's being kind of a satire of keeping women down is really undone by the Quark stuff on the bookends.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's not to say there's a lot of stuff in the middle too, but the Quark stuff at the bookends is just really, it really feels tone deaf to what I think they may have been trying to do and failing at.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because I think the middle is just a straight Ferengi episode. It's what you expect from the Ferengi when they make an appearance. And, the first 10 minutes of the sex change operation are kind of like, I would describe them as like datedly inoffensive in a lot of ways. I think that the longer that sequence goes on, the worse it becomes as it moves along. And then to end it with Quark that way, my big problem was that the moral of it, when Quark even states to the camera, he's like, the thing that I've learned from this episode is that I need to be more accepting of women or something like that.
Right.
And it feels almost, they're stating it so bluntly that they're almost making a joke of that fact that he's doing.
Well, they are, because I mean, even after he says it, he's like, it must still be the hormones.
The hormones speaking, yeah. And so they're not taking the moral lesson seriously,
right?
Which kind of makes sense because it's a comedy episode. It's almost like it's like a Seinfeld riff or something that they're trying to do a kind of no hugging, no feelings type lesson from it.
But I mean, they go out of their way to make Quark a gross misogynist at the beginning.
Yes.
And I mean, even through the middle of it, like, again, I think you can argue that it is in line with the way that the Ferengi work, but it's a side of Quark that we've never seen this intense of, and to play it for laughs is kind of weird.
Yeah.
But they go out of their way to make him so gross and misogynistic. As I was watching, I'm thinking, are they just amping this up in order to A, make it awkward when he has to become a woman, and then B, he has the big change of heart at the end. So it needs to be that much more clear at what they're doing. And then at the end, it's just like, yeah, he doesn't really have a change of heart. He's just, influenced by hormones in his system. And then when that Dabo girl is like, yeah, I'll give you a hand job, he's like, wait, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, totally. Let's do it.
Toss out what I learned.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't just, I guess I had to come in kind of arguing for the episode, and I still think that it's, I don't know if it would land on my like worst of Star Trek list in a lot of ways, just because maybe I would, but who knows?
It's the weird thing about it is it's one of those things where we're deep enough into the series, and the people who are working on the series are good enough and know how to do the show well enough that it's actually not really structurally bad.
No, it works as a story, sort of, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, say what you want about the way the Ferengi shit works, whatever. But, like, I don't even think most of the story relies on Ferengi stuff. Like you said, it's just such a tried and true, quote unquote, tried and true trope. Ooh, alliteration.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
That it's just a standard, like, Three Stooges sketch with Ferengi in it.
Right.
It's like if you changed everybody to Vulcan and a couple other details, it wouldn't really be that much different. It's the same story. The person with power comes in and they have to convince him to be on their side, so they send one of the guys dressed up as a hot chick to say it's like half of the Bugs Bunny cartoons from the 60s.
No, that was going to be my reference. Like, this is just really a Bugs Bunny cartoon that happens, and like you can't get.
If Bugs Bunny was a horrible misogynist,
right? The thing is, Bugs Bunny doesn't really talk, so he doesn't have a choice to play that up in any way.
Right.
Yeah, like. Is the episode better if you eliminate that opening and closing scene? I understand the opening scene. However, we started talking about Umox, which is their rubbing their ears sexual thing. Is kind of like when the series started, we were kind of like, wow, it's kind of funny, like, or kind of like brazen of this show off of TNG to basically call getting a hand job like this alien term that they use and be very unsubtle about it. Then it moved into in the middle of the season, we were kind of like, it's kind of weird that they give each other Umox in public, isn't it? Like, that's a strange thing. And now we're at the point of it feels almost too unsubtle about what it is that it's like disgusting when they talk about it. And it's gone through quite a little evolution.
He gives her a book.
Yeah, the Kama Sutra of Umox. Yeah. Has a more Ferengi title, I think. It's like Umox and the Potential of Profit or something is the title, but yeah.
Yeah, I actually forgot what Umox was. Like, I didn't even for the rest of the context of the rest of the scene made it pretty clear what was going on. But when he gave her the book and she read the title, I was like, "Is this like an investment guide?" And I was like, "No, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is there's some shady shit going on by her boss.
Yeah,
trying to pressure her in certain ways."
It's almost like a Scorsese scene. That girl is so nice. And his whole employee review is like, everyone thinks you're just great. You're fantastic. What a nice person. And the actress seems very nice. And then it flips it completely around into Quark's sexual harassment to keep your job situation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those weird episodes where it's like, if you take a step back and you look at what they're doing, in the story that they're telling, the Ferengi are being really gross about stuff, but that's how they've always been written, and that's the kind of species they are written as. So it's difficult to... There's a certain level where you can, I think you are allowed to...
accept their actions, I think is my argument.
Like, accept isn't the right word. But
accept them doing
it.
Like, not accept it in terms of them being... that it's a good thing to do, but I can understand why this species would come up with this plan and do this this way.
Yeah, like characters who are bad guys do bad things. So if they're doing bad things and you don't like that they're doing bad things, then they are being written correctly to the way that they are supposed to be written. Obviously there are limits for what people want. I mean, I think it comes down to this isn't super enjoyable to watch.
I think it comes down to Star Trek is not a gritty, realistic scene where your motivations have to stay that way. Yeah,
that's the thing. Is like their misogyny has. I mean, I think you could have a whole different conversation about whether or not the lightness at which they approach the misogyny of the Ferengi in every other episode is appropriate. Because I mean, you could go the other way and be like, no, these are. They're making a joke out of the fact that they are actively oppressing the female part of their species.
Yes.
But that being said, they are written in a fairly light way across the board until you get to this episode. And then all of a sudden they turn into the Ferengi that we have talked about, where it's like, oh, it'd be great if they took these guys seriously.
Right.
and it really stands out and feels gross.
Yeah.
And in a way that, like, I think if you took the beginning and the end off and kept the middle more or less the same, I think it goes down a little easier, if only because what they're doing is more farcical, for better or worse. I'm not saying that's good. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that's what it is.
The other thing I don't know how it would be received nowadays if instead of him being surgically altered, he was just wearing a dress, like Bugs Bunny, like he's literally Bugs Bunny just wearing a dress. The second weirdest scene is when Brunt and that guy just stare at Quark tits for a couple seconds.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's not great. Again, it's one of those things where, I guess if you want to justify it, you take a step back and you go, all right, sure, whatever. This is how the Ferengi are. But yes, through the 2019 lens, this episode, it does not hold up very well.
Although it was strangely progressive of the guy. He's like, Brunt is like, he's not really a woman. And he goes, he's close enough for me, which is kind of a progressive approach to it, I guess.
But yeah, it's, I don't think him dressing as a woman does it any favors either.
I think it would still be received poorly, but it seems it wouldn't allow for that scene of him to just like, there's something very strange about Quark just stripping down to nothing to prove the point.
Yeah.
Like him, it feels a little bit more of a farce if he's kind of fooling this Ferengi while not acting as a particularly effective female or woman version. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like if it's more of like clowning on the fact that the guy is so unobservant, I guess. I still don't think that would be portrayed well, but it would eliminate that sort of weirdness of Quark literally becoming a woman or like transitioning into a female sex at that point through the hormones and everything and Dr. Bashir's treatment.
I think there's also you get into these things where it's like Riker gets turned into a Romulan for an episode and then turned back and it's fine, or Kira gets transformed into a Cardassian and then she's fine by the end of the episode. But when you do something that has more realistic stakes or is more easily relatable, such as a straight up sex change, and it's like, oh yeah, we can do that in about 15 minutes in the sickbay, and you'll go one way and then you go back and no problem. You'll be, bing, bang, boom, you're fine. I think that's a little bit harder to swallow too, because there are so many people who obviously that's going to affect in a certain way, knowing what they are going through, dealing with that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah.
So I can see that coming off as insensitive. But yeah, it almost feels like it would be less in line with Star Trek to just have him dress up as just in clothes.
Yes, I think that feels more like a Ferengi episode, though. Like that, it's that kind of jokey clowniness that typify the Ferengi, and I think it fits that. Yeah,
I would agree with that. A straight up like surgical sex change for 40 minutes is just, I don't know. I think you're going down the wrong route with that one.
Yeah, it's strange. We've talked enough about the Ferengi-ness of like what makes a Ferengi episode not work or anything. This one is strangely a misfire. Just from the point of view of like, I'm not sure at any point that like maybe I could see the very original pitch being considered okay. Like if they're like, we're going to play it like classic Hollywood, it'll be hysterical. And it's just Star Trek isn't funny enough, or the format isn't built for this kind of thing to go on with it. Like it's a bad Star Trek episode more than it's a bad episode writing wise and everything. And as you say, they've been doing this long enough where they're decent enough at putting the episodes together that they can take something like this and it comes across as middling at best, I guess. And then once you break it down, it actually falls apart a little bit more under inspection.
Yeah, I wonder if it would have gone down a little easier if they had been more meta about it. Like the Little Green Men episode is very, very meta.
Yeah.
In its references to the 40s and everybody smoking, and it's clear that they are letting you know that they are making a joke. I wonder if, I don't know how you would do it in this situation, but I wonder if being a little bit more meta about the situation might have made it come off a little better.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, there's so many classic comedy things that you could do. Why do this one?
This one's the best. Yeah, it's even strange down to the, when female Quark makes her appearance and the camera's just panning over her breasts, basically to prove that it's a woman, and it's just it's really something. It's really spectacular. Yeah, it's you know.
And even the humor, I think they get into this weird zone where they're trying to be serious sometimes, but then they're also trying to be farcical, and it just kind of doesn't blend together. Like the scene where Quark is arguing with his mother, he's saying some pretty nasty shit.
Yeah, that ties into their backstory. It's building off of everything we know about those two to this point.
Yeah, and like that's an instance where you're like, okay, yeah, this is actually pretty accurate Ferengi writing if you're going to be really honest about it. But then it ends with a comedy beat of her keeling over and having a heart attack.
Yes.
It's like it's
tough. It's strange
to
me.
Parse out.
I think I mentioned before, Bear has mentioned that like if someone asked him in an interview what he would redo about the series, and he said that he would have abandoned trying to make the Ferengi work as comedy. And
yeah.
I think that I understand that. This is a strange one to me because I think the idea fits into a generic Star Trek mold. Like there's a way, if you don't play this as a comedy like this, I think you can do something about, like, if you seriously took the struggles of the Ferengi females seriously, you can kind of have a good Star Trek episode about them.
Right. Yeah.
But they don't want to do it with this race, so it comes off as wasted potential. Yeah,
that kernel that they play for laughs, like I said at the beginning about just having women wear clothes, destroying the infrastructure of their economy, is pretty interesting, and is ripe for exploration if you're going to take it seriously. But it's just a punchline in this.
I even like and I think the Ferengi as comedy work in a way. I don't think this is an A+ joke, but I kind of like the Sluggo Cola stuff that they've got going. Like we've mentioned before, how our version of the Ferengi would just have like different. It would be like a truer version of capitalism, or like the free market, where they'd all be good at different things. And having one of them be like the Coca-Cola conglomerate is kind of a funny idea to me, that he's very successful. And, it's got a catchphrase, and it's kind of a stupid joke, but it works on this goofy Ferengi way. If you want to go down this path of goofy Ferengi, I like the stuff like Sluggo Cola. And I like, the jokes about like, if we give them pockets, they'll have money. And with the money, they'll buy things like that. That's just a very funny idea to me. And I think that it works. And that's a better satire in a Star Trek view than it is the gender switching process that they go through.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Explaining or rationalizing the empowerment of women through how it doubles the consumer base is A+ Ferengi rationale.
Honestly, they're not very good businessmen if it took them that long to realize that either. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I mean, it would make sense that the people who sit atop the tower on Ferenginar are, the CEO of Coke, the CEO of IBM.
Yep, Apple. It would be the Steve Jobs and everything. Yeah,
yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, that's fascinating. I think that's where I think you could bring the Ferengi back and do something like that, and take it a little bit more seriously now, and have it be a little bit more of a satire or a straight science fiction commentary about stuff.
Yep.
I think you run the risk at this point of it being really, really too obvious of a move. But
you mean
I think there's some
making them more realistic is the only way to go? Therefore, it's a tough thing to do.
Yeah, because I guess so. Because like if you let's say in Picard, right, in the Picard series, they bring back the Ferengi and they show how like we were saying, the top people in their government are the leaders of these massive corporations and stuff. That feels like too simple of a comment or a satire to make.
It is, yeah.
But I guess it depends on how you play it and what you do with it. If you really lean into it, it's going to feel like, oh, well, this is the obvious comment to make. It rings a little hollow.
Yeah,
but
that's probably the problem with them, right? Is that their setup is too blunt and broad to be effective satire. There's nothing hidden about the Ferengi. It's not like they literally just want money. So it's not like you can make an allegory about their drive for product X is like greedy capitalists, basically, if you want to use that language. It's more just they literally are greedy capitalists. And so you're stuck in how you can portray them, because in the Star Trek universe, they don't seem realistic, even though they're hyper-realistic. You know what I mean? Because money doesn't exist in Star Trek. So when they pop in, it feels like, A, I don't understand how this works in universe, and B, they're far too normal in terms of real life being inserted into a Star Trek story. And so you can't really gussy up their stories like that. And it's unfortunate.
Yeah, unfortunately, the place that they really take is if you have a group of alien races talking about something, they're the ones they cut to where they're like, but the profit margins will be so much sweeter and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And that's about it.
Yeah, the only effective thing that I think they do work in context of if you tone them down, you can bring the Ferengi into interspecies communications, and they do sometimes work. There was one episode where Quark talked about he used arms dealing as a metaphor for the war that was coming on, and that kind of works. Like when you take them seriously enough that they're actually capable and a threat, I think that they can be done. But I'd agree with you that they're probably a difficult species to do right and well, especially if you're trying to evolve them from where they are now. When
you say interspecies communications, do you mean making Ferengi like the kings of the phone card?
That would be that.
Where you need to go through Ferengi.
They own the phone lines, basically. Yeah, you have to use their lines of communication. They just have a lot of burners that they're trying to sell.
Do you remember phone cards? I remember going when I went to college. The number one thing, there were two things that were the most anticipated present from graduating high school or whatever, and it was gas cards and phone cards.
Yes.
And I don't know if phone cards even exist. Maybe they still do to call different countries and stuff. But
yeah, I think they do.
Not the way that they used to before
No.
Cell phones became completely ubiquitous.
No, we're into the unlimited minutes of our careers here. Let's take a break. We're going to play an audio clip. Me and Clay will come back. We'll give our final thoughts about Profit and Lace, and then read some Patron thoughts.
Now, are you sure? Oh, completely.
I tell you, that is not a female!
Well, she's close enough for me. My dear, let's go tell Zek that I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure he remains Grand Nagus.
But why?
Because that's what Lumba wants.
His name's Quark!
All right, everybody. So, thank you very much for listening. If you want to support the show, patreon.com/the Pensky File is the way to do that. A couple dollars a month and you get extra stuff, including if you're a Captain tier supporter, you get a shout out at this point. Special thanks go to Andrew Cherlog, Ben Douglas, Bradley Killens, Captain Quark, Cardinal Doomsday, Christian Pouch, David K, Dwayne Hackett, Eric C. Johnson, Yarpy, Joint Mango, Kevin Reyes, Kyle Barrett, Matt Cutler, Matthew Ross, Mike Burnett, Nathan Elliott, Neil Brennan, Nick Sergi, Robert Cummins, Russell Elledge, Samuel Custer, Grim Santo, Sean Spinobi, Tark Latif, Vault 13 Hero, and Will Yates. Thank you very much for supporting the show. Now let's read some patron comments here, Clay. Point Extra G says, I'm trying to imagine the room where DS9 episodes were pitched. Someone raises their hand and says Quark in drag, and somehow, some way, everyone says, that's a great idea.
Stop right there. Say no more. Give this man a raise.
You give him the Emmy. Give him the Emmy. Captain Quark says, didn't I just read Captain Quark, or did I read? No, that was Point Extra G, sorry. What can I say about this episode that DS9 fans haven't said for the past 20 years? Yes, it's bad. Shockingly bad for this late in the series run. It feels more like an episode of Futurama than DS9. While it's worthy of most of the criticism that fans levy at it, I can't say that I found it offensive. It's just really, really stupid. Samuel S. says, I should have run for the hills when I saw this episode synopsis. I didn't need to see Quark cross-dressing. It wasn't funny, and I felt very uncomfortable watching it. Easily the worst Ferengi episode of the series and one of the worst DS9 episodes in general. I would have rather watched the Omega Glory again, to be honest. I'd say the Omega Glory is stupider than this, but that's a discussion for another video.
I don't know if I watched that one.
It's the TOS one. You might not have seen it.
Oh.
Chad Wiley says, what can I say but yikes? Some types of comedy work really well in Star Trek, but apparently National Lampoon isn't one of them. Good reference to National Lampoon. Dwayne Hackett says, as funny as this episode is, and it does have a few genuine points of comedy in it, the episode is mostly a skip for me. Why wouldn't they write a story around Pell from Season 2's Rules of Acquisition? Its saving grace, as always, is Jeffrey Combs. Profit and Lace from Norman Buckwald. Some like it hot and Tootsie still work even with the changing in times, but this one doesn't. Ferengi culture still does not excuse this abomination in writing, i.e. just plain bad, etc. In fact, when I was watching the documentary, which included a theoretical planning pitching of a Season 8 episode, In this endeavor, we get to see how the creative team got together to come up with those episodes in action. I wondered in the back of my mind how Profit and Lace could even come close to fruition. Episode is absolutely unwatchable. I only watched it for the first time in years around a year ago because I was wondering if it could have been as bad as I remembered. And oh, it was even worse. Much, much worse. Can an episode be ranked 0 out of 5? 1 second. Can there be some way we can vote a Krennan-ship on this episode? And yes, the episode should begin with an apology, not only to the transgender community, but maybe all persons of all genders and sexual identities. #MeTooQuark.
I didn't know that they do that on the documentary. I'm looking forward to seeing them break an episode like that.
Yeah, it's a big part of the documentary, actually. They do
really cool.
The first episode of season 8.
I'm very interested to see that because I find that stuff very, very fascinating. There was a show that was on Netflix for a while called like The Writer's Table or something. It was hosted by Jim Rash, the guy who plays the dean on Community.
Yep, it was a good series.
Yeah, it was really great. And he would have writers from different writers' rooms for shows on. And they had the writers' room for New Girl on, and they actually did this on the fly on the episode, and it was so fun to watch, but also made me think like, man, it's amazing how the kernel of nothing can generate into an episode. Because it was like, they were like, okay, Winston decides he wants to have a mustache. And like that was the genesis for all of these things. And they had everybody pitching these things like, oh, well, then this guy would do this, and then this would do this. And it was really fun to see how that stuff comes about. Yeah,
it's an interesting, I won't say anything about the documentary. I have thoughts about it, but it is that you do get a pretty good sense of how the writer's room worked on DS9 20 years later, where they're working on this kind of stuff.
That stuff seems to be fairly... how a lot of that stuff comes from just generally, because I remember on the Simpsons commentaries, in the early episodes of The Simpsons, they don't have very distinct names for the episodes because they were just on TV. They didn't need names.
Right.
So a lot of them were just like plot things. So the one I'm thinking of in particular was Lisa Gets a Pony is the name of the episode.
Yep.
And the writer was talking about saying like, yeah, I mean, we didn't need to come up with names for the episodes at the time. And that was just what I wrote on the note card that I brought to the pitch meeting.
Yeah.
It was just one of like 5 note cards that I had with ideas that hadn't been fleshed out. And one of them was Lisa Gets a Pony. And that's the one we picked.
Zam Nuclear Wessel says, rightfully reviled as this is, I find the Sluggo Cola jingle hilarious. Matthew Ross says, yeah, so the acting is good. The actors have their Ferengi down with no problem. The same questions of how Ferenginar's politics works, who's in charge, etc. The funniest part is the 2 bodyguards facing off. Otherwise, it's a Ferengi comedy.
I forgot to mention that. I really like that part with the 2 tall guys staring at each other. I thought that was good.
I like that it's the same species. It's just 2 of the same guy looking at each other. Quark's cross-dressing, not shocking. The Slum Cola stand-in sounded as gross as the slamiest cola there can be. As for the eventual result, no surprises. What's next here? Will Yates says, let's be honest here, people. We all started watching this show to see the cavalier attitude towards gender reassignment surgery in the future. Seriously, I'm amazed that there was no pushback from anyone. Hey, Doc, could you make me look like a woman for a week so I can close this business deal? I have to imagine that if this came out today, there would be some serious public fallout from the story of a man needing to have a sex change to liberate an entire planet of women from servitude. I guess the Me Too movement fizzles out before the 24th century. Aside from all that, I really liked the episode. Even Brunt was great, especially when he yells, his name is Quark!
Yeah, that's a good point that I didn't even totally take in, I don't think, is that what Quark is basic. Quark in drag is liberating an entire planet of women. Yeah, that's not super great.
Yeah.
That's Angel One level of missing the point, I think.
Kyle Bear with the final comment here. Profit and Lace, the first 20 minutes aren't too much worse from a regular Ferengi episode, but then it takes an almighty turn towards Stinktown. The message is all over the place, but the episode's biggest crime is against comedy. Man, it's tough to watch. Maybe, just maybe, it would have all been worth something if Quark learned something by the end, but then we get that terrible final scene where it turns out that women do want to get sexually harassed by their bosses, and Quark had nothing to learn because he was doing nothing wrong in the first place. What a load of old bollocks. Which is British for what a fantastic episode, I think. But let's close it out here, Clay. Thank you, patrons, for writing in with your thoughts about Profit
we both
and Lace.
Speak English, but we're separated by the same language. It's really true.
I know. We should have a lexicon reassignment surgery so that we can switch over and then liberate the British. let's give our final. Well, thank you, patrons, very much for supporting the show and leaving your comments. Not a great episode, as everyone has come to terms with here. We all had our Kumbaya session. Clay, what are you going to give this one on our scale of 1 to 5?
Yeah, it's tough to give it higher than a 1, really.
It is.
Yeah, I'm 1.
It's an obvious 1. Everyone knew it was going to be a 1 coming in, and it is a 1 for me as well.
Oh, I didn't stick to my promise, though. I did say that I was going to give this one a 5.
You didn't do a good job of arguing that point, unfortunately.
I know. I'm sorry, I forgot.
Were you watching it just going, all right, here's the 5 I have to give, and it's just your face like slowly turning into a frown as things are going along here?
Yeah. I mean, the way that he harassed her was really accurate. I mean, I have to give them credit for being so true to the way that, awful people are. It's like, no, I'm not going to go down that road. Don't worry.
It's a tough road to hoe. Guys, thank you very much for listening. We're both giving it 1s. That's the end of Profit and Lace. It came and it went. Thank you for listening to the show. Thank you for supporting us. You can check out all the social media links down below. You can go to patreon.com/the Pensky File if you want to support us there monetarily. It's much appreciated. Otherwise, there's the Teespring account down there if you want some t-shirts and all that good stuff. Clay, do you have anything you want to say?
At this point, Kickstarter's over. Thank you again to everybody who threw in. Huge success. And I look forward to doing the book and then maybe doing another one after that. We'll see how it goes.
Cool. Yeah, thank you guys for supporting that. It's very helpful. Very much appreciated. And I think that's it. We have a bunch of Real Ripes coming out. If they haven't come out yet, we're doing Catherine Bigelow's coming up, and we finished our Amy Adams one of Nocturnal Animals, which should be out before this, I think. So let us know what you thought about that. And then we're moving on to Catherine Bigelow, and then we've got Halloween-themed stuff. Star Trek continues as normal. I put a poll out about what people want to... some updates about what people would want to expect from Star Trek going forward and things like that. I got some good feedback. We'll discuss. We'll let you know what our plans for after DS9 are going to be. But that's it. So, thank you very much for listening. And guys, we will see you next time.